Okay, this is a bit different. Today we are shooting this from a different location. We are not in Rware. This is the other thing we do, which is a strategic communications outfit we have. This is Gunjiri Consulting. And so that's why this looks a bit different from what we're used to. And I want to speak to something much more national. I want to talk about patriotism. And the reason I want to talk about patriotism is because I have been following the news, especially in regard to this conversation about the finance bill. And I get a bit concerned. Today was the National Prayer Day. And of course, I'm sure we noticed that one side of the political divide did not show up at the national prayers. And this tells you how personal we have become with our politics, to the point where we can't even actually sit around the table and pray together. And that leads me to the conversation for today, the issue about patriotism. I know some people say that patriotism is being loyal to your country all the time and to your government sometimes. When I think about the things that are going on, when I think about the conversations around the finance bill, I can't help but notice there is, of course, a side of government led by the president and the deputy president who are doing everything they can to articulate what the finance bill is and what it will do for Kenyans. And then, of course, there's a side that is in opposition or doesn't agree with this government, that has done everything they can to poison the environment in which we are in, to a point where if you walk out to any member of the public and ask them about the finance bill, they tell you it's a very bad thing. The saddest part is that most people haven't even read it. And we are picking our cues from the loudest noises in the marketplace. And right now, the loudest noises are those people who are opposing government. And you can feel it. I mean, it's strong. It's nearly hatred. And there seems to be a concerted effort and desire for this government to fail, you know. And I know the feeling. I know where that feeling is coming from, especially for those of us who did not support this particular government. There's a part of you that wants this government to fail. The problem is, where will you be standing that will be safe when this government fails? And there's a gentleman I have a lot of respect for, who's been around this country for a long time. I've seen many things. And then one time he told me that when all is said and done, you have to always want your country to succeed. It doesn't matter whether you are the one running it or it's your enemy running it. Today, when I listen to people who did not support Kenya Kwanza, using their intellects, their capacities, their platforms to bore holes into the government and to show how this government is failing, I feel them, you know. But then I ask myself, so if this government fails and it is the only government we have, then what happens? Another day I was watching a movie about some of the things that happened in Greece, some things that have happened in some countries where a government has actually collapsed. And I asked myself, is that what we want to happen? Would we be happy, as those of us who are not in government, those of us who are in opposition, would we be happy if this government collapsed? It's a question we need to all ask ourselves. Would we be happy if this government collapsed? Because if this government collapsed, we would not have a government. Would we have a country? And as we think about these questions, every government has 5 years. And by the way, gentlemen, friends, ladies and gentlemen, 5 years is not a long time. We're nearly done with 1 year so far. So it's another 4 years. Why don't we do everything we can to make sure this country keeps moving forward? This is a season. We were in the Jubilee season. This is the time we were under the KANU season. This is the time we were under the PNU season for Kibaki. We are now in the Kenya Kwanza season. The most important thing is for us to keep kicking the ball forward. Keep moving forward. Whether we're moving fast, we're moving slowly. At no time should we ever want ourselves to move backwards. So I want to talk to primarily those people who don't support this government. As we criticize it, as we bash it, is it possible for us to do it in a way that doesn't destroy what we have? Is it possible for us to fight, to criticize this government without destroying the way we live? If today some of the things we are saying will happen, what will happen? What would be the effects to you? I've been thinking about the finance bill. And by the way, I want to talk to people who, when the discussion starts tomorrow in Parliament. And you know, the funniest thing is, and this has been my advice to the members of Parliament who will be debating this bill, in a year, nobody will remember how you voted. So can you make sure that you vote based on what you think is right, rather than what you think is popular? Because popularity is very fickle. What is popular today is going to be very unpopular in a very short time. And then the biggest mistake you can make is to vote for something popular and then shoot yourself in the foot, not have the capacity to sustain yourself in government. Your government collapses. Oh, believe me, you will be very unpopular very quickly. So as people go in to debate this finance bill tomorrow, please make sure you vote to move this country forward, not to move this country back. If you don't have an alternative, you don't have a choice, right? But I go back to my point as I finish. Nobody has a place to stand that will be safe if our country was to collapse. Governments are what we do as civilized people to run our affairs. And you don't always have to agree with your government. But you have to ensure we're moving forward. So as we criticize, I'm going to go back to that point again. Let us criticize this government. That is good. That is a role of opposition. But let us do it in a way that builds rather than in a way that destroys. I see the amount of venom that is targeted at personalities in government, whether it is against the president, against the deputy president, against people who seem to be supporting government. The kind of venom that sometimes comes against me is personalized based on the fact that, oh, you are a sellout, oh, you are what. I'm like, me, I want Kenya to succeed. I've got children. Kenya Kwanza is not going to be running this country for the next 20 years, right? President William Ruto is not going to run this country for 20 years. He's going to run it for 10 or 5. In those 5, it is possible to destroy a country and you completely sacrifice the 10 or 20 you have. So I want to ask, the conversations we need to have, and I'm going to be challenging us every week, even as we talk about economy. You know, when you see me here in Nairobi, I'll talk about the economy, I'll talk about social issues, you know, I'll also talk about national political issues. But I'm always going to make this point. Let's be patriots. Let us root for our country to succeed. By the way, let us root for our government to succeed, even if it is not the government you voted for. Let us ask ourselves today, if Kenya Kwanza succeeded, you know all of us will succeed. Whether you voted for the government or not, if Kenya Kwanza failed, all of us would fail. Whether you voted for the government or not. So I want to challenge everybody who believes they have a public platform. You have a capacity, you have an ability, you have an intellect. Use that ability, use that intellect to help our country move forward. Use that intellect to add value to what government is doing rather than to take away value. As we play politics, let us not personalize politics to the point where we're willing to destroy our country to win. It is possible to win and lose. If I stood on the point of I want this government to fail, and then it fails and I win, I will have lost, right? So let's be patriots, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Let's root for our country to succeed. On the issue of the finance bill, I shared my points a couple of days ago, and I'll come back to it again. There is nothing like good taxes. We will never sit together and agree to pay taxes. In fact, if we are asked, we will never pay a cent. So there's no point at which we'll ever sit down and agree that we want to pay taxes. Taxes, as I told you about what Albert Bushnell said, this Harvard historian, taxes is the price civilization pays to stay civilized. If we want to stay civilized, we want to have a common wealth, we want to have a common good that we are protecting, we're going to have to pay taxes. We can discuss and negotiate about how it's done, And I know I have seen some interesting things in this finance bill that are positive, and that is not enough. We're not having enough of that conversation. And I hope in coming days we'll hear a lot more about that, especially from pro-government members of parliament. Going into public spaces, going onto television, using the Twitter and Facebook platforms to push this agenda. Because if you believe in this government, please push the agenda of this government. You can't sit on the fence. And I will tell you again, and this is my last statement, you will always, for the next 2-3 years at least, before we go back into the madness of politics and campaigns, please choose what is right rather than what is popular. Because what is popular today, in 3 months, I assure you, will be different. In 3 months, and I remember the Deputy President, Rigathi Gachagua, said that some time back, in 3 months, we'll be discussing something different. We'll not be discussing about the finance bill. So make sure you do and decide something you can live with, not something that makes people happy. Thank you very much. God bless you, and I look forward to continuing to have this conversation with you on this platform and seeing what we can do to add value. Asanteni sana.